Charles Haddon Spurgeon was one of the great preachers of all times. He was a great pastor, a great revivalist, and he said one year that the wind of God had blown across Britain, and he said, finally, we are seeing the dawn of a new day in our nation and our communities. And that revival that he talked about had some similarities to the revivals throughout the history of the church, because you see, revival is always preceded by prayer, and prayer permeated that revival during the days of Mr. Spurgeon. And you find that throughout the history of the church, when God is moved, there's always been a spirit of prayer that is engulfed the people of God. You can go all the way back to the Old Testament and Nehemiah. When he heard about the walls in Jerusalem being torn down, his heart was broken, and he wept and he cried to God, and God gave him a vision of rebuilding the walls in Jerusalem. And that's what happens in revival. Before revival, our hearts are broken. We see our families, we see our communities, we see our churches, we see our nations, and we see the walls have been torn down. And so our hearts are broken, and we cry out to God. And when we cry out to God, then God begins to move. God begins to work. And there's a revival that begins to take place, but it's always permeated by a spirit of prayer. Prayer produces revival. Revival produces victory. And they always go hand in hand. And so there's this relationship in the Bible, in history, and I can tell you in my own life. My life and ministry was born in a revival when one pastor began to cry out to God because he saw the young people had left his church, and he cried to God, and God sent a mighty revival and changed not only a church, but changed an entire community. I've seen revival in places like Romania, where the church came under a burden of prayer, and they prayed, and God sent them a revival not only to the church, but to the whole nation. And right now in this very generation, we're seeing God move and work in the nation of Iran. God's sending a revival among His people. People are coming to Christ. But it began when people began to cry out to God and seek God. Revival always is associated with prayer. Prayer produces victory. Victory produces revival. So we must pray. I want to encourage you today to seek the face of God, to pray and to call on Him. And let's see what God will do.